Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and today I have my March wrap up. So I had a pretty good reading month in March. I did not stick to my TBRs very well. I ended up kind of just reading all over the place and reading a lot of audio and ebooks actually. I was going through my list of books that I read and I only read 2 physical books. So it was definitely a month of getting some things checked off my Kindle list, some library books, lots of like Scribd and Libby and such. So overall, definitely non-physical books dominated this month, but I'm not mad about it. I believe I read 11 books. Yeah, which I think is the most that I've read in a month ever, maybe? I don't know if I've ever broken 10 before, so that's really exciting. But yeah, it was kind of all over the place. Again, a lot of fantasy, which is to be expected at this point. I don't know how. I literally just get in like fantasy kicks, so I like color code here based on genre, and this like weird brown yellow color is fantasy. So you can see I was on a fantasy kick here, took a break for some like contemporary-ish stuff, and then tons of fantasy again. So I don't know what happens. But enough rambling, and let's just get into the books that I read. I'm just gonna go in order that I read them because that seems to work well for me. I did have several rereads as well, and I'll talk about that maybe all together. First up, I read Saga Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughn and Fiona Staples. This is a graphic novel that is super weird. It's about these like alien races, like part human with like some paranormal aspects to them. Very hard to describe. I believe there are currently 9 published, and this is like a very beloved graphic novel series, so I wanted to pick it up and I was able to get it from my library. I really liked it. It was probably one of my favorite graphic novels that I've ever read. I typically don't connect very well with graphic novels for whatever reason, but this one I like felt really invested in. I really liked the characters. I had no idea what was going on for most of it, and that's still kind of true even almost a month later, but I'm not mad about it. She needs some attention, I think. Just hang out. I feel like Chelsea. I love you very much, but you need to calm down. Okay, well, there's a kitten on my lap, so I really liked this. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I will for sure continue with the series, if only because I still don't know what's happening. It follows 2 main characters who are of different races or species. I don't know how to classify that. And they are in sort of like a forbidden romance. They have a baby and now they are on the run because their peoples are at war with each other. So I really liked it. Definitely will continue when I have the chance to pick it up again. Next up, I read The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. This is a fantasy story following a group of maybe like 5, I want to say, maybe 6 characters who are trying to pull off a heist. Honestly, I have forgotten so much of this. I listened to this on audiobook. This takes place set in a hotel that one of the characters owns, and he has kind of employed all of them to perform heists fairly regularly, and now they're trying to find like a specific object. And like, now that I'm thinking back on it, I like really didn't get a lot of it. Like, it was very confusing, and I think because I was reading it via audiobook, I was just kind of like listening and like, yep, whatever, I don't totally understand this, but maybe it'll be explained. I don't know. The plot didn't super work for me. I thought the characters were good and I enjoyed the like relationships between them, but overall, I just felt like it was kind of lackluster. I definitely like don't think I'm gonna continue with this series. I believe this is a series. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm gonna continue with it because I honestly just don't really care at this point. I don't think Roshani Chokshi is the author for me. I DNF'd her other book, The Star-Touched Queen, at the end of 2018. I couldn't get into it. It was super weird. I had a hard time following, and I was reading it physically. I think the same would have happened with Gilded Wolves for me if I hadn't read it via audiobook, but because I was listening for an hour at a time on my commute, an hour and a half some days, I think that made it a little bit easier. I probably won't read Roshani Chokshi again, I don't think, but I mean, never say never, you know. Okay, next up, I started my unintentional reread of the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. I listened to all 3 audiobooks this month, and I enjoyed it like 1,000 times more than I thought I would. I really loved The Hunger Games when it first came out. I read the first book within a couple months of it being published. My mom got it for me for Christmas, just kind of randomly, and I fell in love with it, immediately pre-ordered the second book. Same thing happened when Catching Fire came out, pre-ordered Mockingjay. Anyway, this is a dystopian story that It's classified as YA, but is like so brutal. I'm sure you know what it's about. Most people do at this point, but in case you're unaware, it's about a society, a futuristic America, where a lot of turmoil has just kind of happened in the country, so that now it's separated into the capital, which is where the president lives and all the like rich, wealthy members of society, and then 12 different, well, originally 13 districts. The 13th was destroyed in the latest war that had happened about 75 years before the Hunger Games takes place. The capital has all this power, and as a way to remind the citizens of the country, Panem, what they lost and what happened, and just kind of to remind them of the severity of the war 75 years prior, they hold something every year called the Hunger Games, where 2 children from each district have to fight to the death for one sole victor to come out at the end. Our main character, Katniss, is one of the tributes from District 12, and we follow her as she fights her way through the Hunger Games and her preparation as she gets there. It is, like I said, really violent, really brutal in a lot of instances, and it is really horrifying that like middle schoolers read this. I gave both Hunger Games and Catching Fire 5 stars. I gave Mockingjay 4.5 because I really don't like the ending, and I just feel like it wraps up too quickly, too nicely. I just have a lot of feelings about the last like bit of it. Yeah, like I said, did not intend to reread the Hunger Games trilogy this month, but I did and really enjoyed it. So that makes up a big chunk of the books that I read. Another audiobook I listened to was Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the Infernal Devices series within the Shadowhunters Chronicles. It's the 4th published book. I gotta be honest, I feel like this is just a repeat of the plot of City of Bones, which is the first book in the entire series. Like, a girl finds her way into this Shadowhunters world and learns all about it, has to like rescue someone she loves, is like very interested in one of the Shadowhunters. There's just a lot of parallels that I found myself getting really bored with it because I just felt like I could predict what was going to happen, and I feel like in most instances throughout the book I did. I also found myself like not paying attention a few times because I was just bored with what was happening. Overall, it wasn't bad. I enjoyed it more than some of the others that I've read in Cassandra Clare's series. Not a lot more, but a little bit. I ended up giving it 3 stars, which is maybe a little bit generous. It might be more like a 2.5, but honestly, it's at least there's no like weird incest plot lines in this one, that's all I'll say. Next, I read Prince Charming, formerly called Royals, by Rachel Hawkins. This is a royal romance. Our main character, Daisy, is growing up in Florida, and her older sister is dating the Prince of Scotland. And so Daisy is kind of thrown into this life of somewhat fame, like a little bit more spotlight than she would have expected or liked, because her sister is involved with the Prince of Scotland. When they get engaged, Daisy goes to Scotland for the summer to essentially like learn how to be in the public eye and how to present herself well and such. It is a romance. She has a romance with one of the characters that she meets over there. I won't say who, but I really, really liked this. It was a lot of fun. It was very fluffy. It was also pretty like sassy, angsty. I feel like Daisy was a very sassy character, which I appreciate. And I will definitely read the next book. It's called Her Royal Highness, and it follows Princess of Scotland. And it's a female-female romance, and it sounds amazing. So yeah, I really, really liked this a lot. Gave it 4 stars. Can't wait to read the next one. Next, I read Astrology, the 12 Zodiac Signs by Luna Sidana. This is essentially exactly what you would expect. It goes through all of the 12 Zodiac signs and characteristics of them, ideal like pairings for relationships, and it also talks a little bit about what a moon sign means, what a rising sign means, what your sun sign means, that sort of thing, and the different planets and what they rule, all that stuff. It just like is a pretty comprehensive look at astrology for a beginner, which I am, I should mention. But I will say I felt like it didn't go into that much more than I already knew. I feel like I'm like decently familiar. I don't know much about like the houses and the planets and that sort of thing, and that was very minimal. The vast majority of this book was about the signs, and I skipped over the relationship part because like I'm only interested in like ideal pairings for Libras, obviously. Anyway, I gave it 3 stars. This was the group book for Zodiac-a-thon, hosted by Carrie from Carrie the Book Bell. It was interesting, and it definitely made me want to read more and learn more. I have found myself getting more interested in astrology in general since becoming friends with Carrie, and yeah, it's interesting. I would definitely recommend it if you want just like some brief info about all the different signs in particular. Next up, I read Sadie by Courtney Summers. I listened to the audiobook because that is, I have heard, the best way to digest this book, and I would definitely agree. Not having read the physical book, but I can't imagine that the physical book would be better than the audio. So this is essentially a book following our main character Sadie, whose younger sister went missing several months ago and then was found dead a couple of days later, and she was clearly murdered, but they have no suspects. They don't have any leads on like who it could have been, what happened to her, other than that she was seen getting into a strange truck the night she died. And then this follows Sadie as she goes to try to find out what happened and essentially tried to avenge her sister's death. So that's part of what the story is, and it follows Sadie in first person. It's a lot like in her head. She also has a stutter, which was really unique representation. I A, didn't know that it had that, and B, I don't think I've ever seen that in a book before, or at least not quite this intentionally, and that was really interesting. The other half, the alternating chapters, are told in podcast form, and so that's why the audiobook is especially fantastic, because the quality of this audiobook production is phenomenal. It sounds like a real podcast. They use multiple voice actors for both the podcast and Sadie's chapters, but there's like music elements. It sounds like interviews over the phone. Like, they did really good work with this. But the podcast is called The Girls, and it is kind of like Serial, the podcast, in that it's like following what has happened, because now Sadie is missing. I should say, this is confusing. The podcast is in present day. The car that Sadie was last known to have and be traveling around in is found with her belongings in it. And then the Sadie chapters are a flashback to when she got the car and like her journey up until that point. So yeah, you're kind of getting flashbacks and present day, and this narrator or this podcast person kind of diving into what happened, where was she, trying to figure out what happened. Anyway, it's so well done. I will say huge trigger warnings and content warnings for pedophilia, child abuse, murder, rape, and just, yeah, be very aware of that. It's definitely a big part of the story. It's brutal. It's really, I feel like it's very polarizing based on the ending. Not polarizing in that people hate it or love it, but you like hate or love the ending. I personally really liked it. I thought it was very realistic. I don't want to spoil anything, obviously, but I would highly recommend this. I give this 5 stars, and I would say the hype is definitely worth it for this one. Next up, I read a memoir called All You Can Ever Know by Nicole Chung. This is a story of Nicole, who was adopted like a couple months after she was born from Korean parents to a white family. Or by a white family. So she was raised in, I believe, Portland, Oregon, as an only child in a Catholic white family. And in her 20s, she decides when she gets pregnant with her first child that she wants to find her birth family and learn a little bit more about them. And so it's basically just her going on this journey and learning more about her family, connecting with members of her family that she's never known before, and also just kind of reconciling it with the fact that she had a very good life with her adoptive family. You could tell this story is so heartfelt and personal and thoughtful. She was very intentional about what she wrote, I believe. I do, however, think it got a little bit repetitive. The same themes, as you kind of would expect, kept coming up, and I don't know, I just felt like, we've heard this before. I don't know, it was repetitive for me. She's a very talented writer. I believe she is a journalist, or she writes some fiction. I can't remember exactly what her writing career is, but she is a writer, and then this is her first published book, I want to say. I didn't rate it because it is a very personal story, and I don't think that I have any business rating that. That was the last book that I read in the month of March. All right, so I want to update you on the readathons that I did in March. I have Okay, well, first of all, I have a spending tracker that I did not fill out in March, so that was well intended. But I have my readathon trackers for the month of March. I participated in 3, but I just wanted to let you know what I completed in the different readathons that I was taking part in. So the first one was Femme Fatale, which was a readathon all about reading fantasy stories written by women. So there were 12 different prompts, like a bingo board that you could fill out, and I managed to complete 5 of the challenges across 2 books, Girls of Paper and Fire and The Gilded Wolves. I read both of those during this week, so I was able to complete the LGBTQIAP+ challenge with Girls of Paper and Fire. Did I talk about what that was about at all? Did I even tell you that I read that? Did I skip over that? I skipped over that, didn't I? Well, I read The Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha and Ngan in March, and I loved it. So I can't believe I didn't talk about it. This is a story of our main character, Lay, who becomes a paper girl, which is essentially a concubine for the king of this society. Every year, 8 women are chosen, young women are chosen to be paper girls, and Lay is kind of unexpectedly chosen. She lives on the outskirts of the kingdom, and so she's taken away from her family to live in this commune with these women, essentially. She is given lessons on like how to be more like refined and how to be a good lover, and it's really, I mean, definite trigger warnings for rape and abuse in this story, just coercion, that sort of thing. And like, yeah. Lay is one of these paper girls, and she is very against it. She has so many like emotions about being part of this horrible tradition, whereas some of the other girls are like so honored to be paper girls, which really rubs her the wrong way. And then partway through the book, there is a female-female romance with one of the other paper girls in life. It is a true slow burn, let me tell you, but well worth it, and I adored this book. I gave it 5 stars. I can't wait to see what else she writes, and I will definitely be recommending this to everyone, essentially. My sister bought this for me for Christmas, so thank you, Allie. I loved this so much. So back to the readathons. I'm a mess. I also, with Girls of Paper and Fire, completed the romance challenge for Femme Fatale. I completed the myth box with The Gilded Wolves because it is sort of inspired by, forget what myths, but it is. Like I said, I have kind of forgotten a lot about this because I just wasn't super into it. Then there was a challenge to read a fantasy by an author of color. Both Girls of Paper and Fire and The Gilded Wolves count. And then finally to read a YA. Again, both of them count. They are both YA. And then I participated in the Ostara Witch-a-thon hosted by Rhiannon at Crescent Moon Reads. There were 5 challenges. I completed 3 of them, the first being Rebirth, read a book in a genre you don't typically read. I counted Clockwork Angel because it is paranormal fantasy, which is not something that I typically read, although I have read more of it in the last year as I am reading through Cassandra Clare's books. Next was romance, so read a book with romance, and I counted Prince Charming for that. That is a definite romance. I did not complete the challenge to read a book set in a warm climate. I mean, kind of Prince Charming because it's summertime, but I mean, Scotland's not warm. I did not read a book with flowers on the cover. However, I did read an action-packed book. I can't remember which of the Hunger Games books counted during that week, but that. So 3 out of 5. For Zodiac-a-thon, so I originally had picked out Sadie as a potential buddy read, but in the end I counted it for my sun sign challenge, which as a Libra was to read a book with morally great characters, because I mean, Sadie, it has like obvious reasons for wanting to avenge her sister's murder, but she is still planning to murder the man that killed her, so like morally gray. I did not complete my challenge for moon sign to read a book about a warrior. I did complete the rising sign challenge for me as Capricorn. It was to read a nonfiction, All You Can Ever Know, and then the group book I read. So that's kind of like where I'm at, what I've done. This video is probably going to be way longer than it needs to be, so I apologize. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to connect with me further, you can find links to my social media accounts in the description box below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on my next video. But until then, happy reading. Bye.